And of course, the really unfortunate news that just broke the other day, right before the experience came out. So unfortunately, everyone wanted to hear right away what you had to say about it. But here we are on the drive-thru, the passing of New Jack.
Yeah, I know that. I guess that it had happened by the time that we recorded, but nobody knew it yet. I guess so. Literally, everybody found out like just shortly after we finished recording, and then of course, a lot of people have been asking on Twitter, and I mean, I can't say that I couldn't believe it because I'm never surprised anymore, unfortunately, at anybody in the wrestling business. But this came out of nowhere. This is sometimes when this happens to people that even I've known in the past, but haven't, you haven't heard of them or seen anything of them in a while or whatever. But we've seen more of New Jack here through the cameos and just the Dark Side of the Ring last year and the stuff he's been doing. And he apparently wasn't in bad health. It was just a heart attack. Well, I mean, all right, that's a stupid statement. He was in bad health because he had a heart attack. But you know what I'm saying. It's not like this had been an illness. He hadn't been going about his normal activities, not that I'd heard of. It was sudden, right? So that's surprising in that part. And I got to be honest with you, I never realized, and he worked for me. I should have had his information on paper. I don't know if I ever had Jack's information on paper. I had some. I don't know if it was correct to turn into the government, but I didn't realize he was only a year younger than I was. Because he was 58. And he started in wrestling late. And I guess I always think when you first see somebody in wrestling, they're 20 years old, right? Just because, that the old territory days in me. But he looked like New Jack. He looked youthful. He sounded fresh. He had all kinds of oomph. So I just took him as younger when I first saw him. But anyway, we started talking about this just a minute before you and I went on the air, and I said, I don't want to tell all the same New Jack stories from Smoky Mountain Wrestling that everybody's heard 15 times, including on Dark Side of the Ring last year. And we had done a show about that episode and New Jack at that point in time. And it's on the YouTube channel. I'm not trying to, fucking encourage everybody to go out of their way. But if you just want to hear the same Smoky Mountain Wrestling stories, we did them all and talked about Jack as far as a talent and his career and how I had seen him and got him to Smoky Mountain. But this was kind of rotten, especially because he was just starting to. He might have ended up having a little third fucking run here, or did he have a second one? I don't know. The first to say whatever. He was starting to do cameos. They did the TV show about him. I assume as FanFests come back to pre-pandemic stages, he would have been even more popular off of that. And the thing is, he'd even been, everybody knows I don't know how Facebook works. I'm not on I couldn't get on Facebook if you held a gun to me. But after we had done those cameos and talked about some of his, and people had bought them for me and everything, he got on the Cult of Cornette Facebook group and was on there recently, but he had sent a message not 2 or 3 weeks ago to Stacy, just to say, hey, who would have thunk it? I'm married. I got a family. I've settled down. I'm happy. And of all the things in our life that has never happened before, that would be one of them, that New Jack had never sent us a message saying, hey, I've settled down. I got a wife and family and I'm happy. Who'd have thunk it? And then this 2 or 3 weeks later, that's fucking strange. I've had some messages from Jack in the past, but they weren't that sunny and positive, right? But I don't know. You know, people tweeted. I didn't tweet anything because as I've said before, and I'm holding to that, I don't tweet about dead people anymore. It's just bizarre. Positive, negative, whatever. Somebody's always got an opinion. I don't want to hear it at that point. But I did look at some of the stuff that obviously everybody was tweeting Smoky Mountain promos and etc. But several people tweeted the clip of I was doing a Kayfabe Commentaries video shoot, I don't know how many years ago. And we're in the middle of the shoot, and then suddenly there's a knock on the door, and somebody's knocking on the door, and New Jack and Mustafa bust in singing, "Why can't we be friends? Why can't we be friends?" And by the time he got over to me and bent over to hug me in the chair, he had forgotten the rest of the words. So he just said, "And I forgot the words to this song." But at that point, it had been almost 20 years, right? So it had tickled me. And we sat down and told some stories for 10 or 15 minutes. And they went, well, New Jack and I did. Mustafa never speaks, that, hello and goodbye or whatever, maybe.
Yeah, you said they came in singing. He came in singing.
Yeah, Mustafa Jack came in singing. Well, actually, Mustafa is not a mute, but he has oftentimes played one on television. He can speak. I've heard it a time or two. But anyway, but I kind of, I kind of got misty at that. And then what really got me was I saw the clip of the statement that Paulie made on Talking Smack about him. And Heyman's just a fucking an oratorial genius, a savant even. Even the shit that he doesn't like to say, he can say it. He says it in the right way. In addition to turning into Alfred Hitchcock, he's starting to get Buddy Wayne's tongue. But it actually somehow the fat tongue and the fat face gives him more gravitas and more expression when he makes everything work for him. He's a fucking genius. But Paul managed to make a statement and make it not be a downer thing, but an up thing, and actually brought almost Paul Heyman brought a tear to my eye on behalf of New Jack without doing a traditional eulogy. He still managed to get. He said and that would have. Actually, when I think about it, maybe he stole my idea because that's the same thing I thought about Pillman. Because there was kind of parallels with Pillman and New Jack when they got on the edge and you couldn't figure out whether they were working or not. I thought, Pillman was pulling a rib. He said that would have been the perfect thing for New Jack to do is pull a rib. Hey, tell his wife, call everybody and tell them I died. See what, the fuck they say. And then I got to thinking it was ironic that it was Happy Heyman that was the reason that me and Jack were mad at each other for 15 years anyway, if we will recall. And I got started thinking about, just without going off topic here of Jack for a minute, do you think that it was part of the plot now in hindsight to make Paulie and ECW baby faces when he had Jack come up there and cut promos on me in Smoky Mountain Wrestling in Philadelphia, where it was like an ICW and Jarrett situation, so that Jack would say that they left because I owed him money rather than the truth, which was they left because Paul told them to fucking leave and no show me so he could start them early. Which is what led to me and Jack being on the outs for a while, which now in hindsight looks like a way that Paulie might have baby-faced himself out of that situation. I don't know. But anyway, everybody that was saying anything about Jack said the same thing for good and bad sometimes. And Jack admitted in a lot of cases on that show there was some bad. The reason why he got over, he was real. You could believe him. Even when he was really still. So that's the thing. And I know everybody says, well, you had good things to say about New Jack, but you knocked the garbage match wrestling. Jack started out as a real professional wrestler. I think ECW pigeonholed him into all of the bad points of New Jack that they could capitalize on, but that doomed him getting a job anywhere else. And, and then he just, he had to keep topping himself. But let's remember, Jack, as a wrestler, he wasn't the most experienced guy in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. He'd only been in the business a couple of years, but he understood working, and he could halfway execute it. Physically, even at that point, he was a promo savant, genius. That was the outstanding part of his goddamn presentation, and he looked like he should to have talked like that. You didn't have some Beavis and Butthead looking motherfucker that was cutting that awesome promo. You had the guy that looked exactly like the guy that ought to be cutting that promo. And the more that he worked with guys that had experience and could, were a step above just the guys he'd been working with in North Georgia, whether it be the Armstrongs or Rock and Roll Express or whoever the fuck, Tracy, White Boy, he got better. And it's only really then when, in ECW, it was just all about chaos. So and then he got more into substances and less into figuring out a way to protect your opponent. And because nobody at that point really cared in that company anyway, they just started bashing each other with shit. So his progression as a wrestling worker stopped there, but the promos were still there and they got better. It's just he had no place to give them that anybody would see him on a major basis because everybody was scared by that point to give him a fucking job. So he started as a wrestler and he could have. And that's the thing. Randy Hales was petrified to even touch them when I was trying to find him a place to go after they'd been in Smoky Mountain for a year. And in Memphis, I can see that, race relations in Memphis historically being what they've been. But, and obviously, Vince in 1995, if they had been available, the Gangstas, 3 years later in the Attitude Era, straight from Smoky Mountain Wrestling without having the reputation for outside the ring as well as just the shit, the diving off the balconies and doing crazy shit. Brian, because the WWF, honestly, in 1995 said, no, we can't do this, right? But just because of the gimmick. But if I could have given to them 3 or 4 years later, they would have fit right in the Attitude Era. Can you see them hopping in and hopping on fucking the Disciples of Apocalypse and the goddamn Bariquas, and it was the whole goddamn thing, and the Nation of Domination. It was the same thing. They just got new gangstas that weren't as scary. But anyway, timing is everything. But I hated to hear that because after all of that shit, and Jack finally seems happy and settled down and normal for once and enjoying it. I couldn't believe it. And we've seen those cameos he was doing. You were laughing at one. He had a fucking knife the size of Delaware.
Yeah, I was saying before that, it's very sad about New Jack's passing. I will say I ran into him several times and would talk to him somewhat on a semi-regular basis in 94 and 95. And he was never anything but nice to me. However, I've seen videos. I know the reputation and everything. But he was always nice to me. And I thought about it. It's like, sometimes when someone passes away, you think what was the last time I saw them? What was the last thing they said? And the last thing I heard New Jack say was him whipping out the biggest knife I've ever seen in a cameo, threatening to chase this fan that paid for the cameo around with his knife. That's my final image of New Jack.
And I said it could have been worse because one of the ones I saw, he put the knife down and says, if I don't get you with that, I'll get you with this, and pulled up a crossbow. But that's what people expected. That's why, you know, that's the thing. Maybe regardless of where he started in wrestling or where he ended up, it may have just been a case of timing. Because once again, in the Attitude Era, if he, without the death, garbage, weapons match, reputation, I think he could have easily fucking gotten a spot in the WWE. Maybe not kept it unless he altered things about his personal life at that point in time, but he was good enough to be involved. In the territories in the 70s, when heels could say and do some outrageous shit and you wouldn't get kicked off television, or even the promotion would only get complaints about the heel rather than itself, he could have been obviously there would have been things he had to tone down verbally, but he could have been a fucking major fucking territory heel. But he came along at a time where there was only, you know, one or two territories, and everything else was still, you know, on the national companies was still Disney World. And then by the time that changed, he'd already gotten the reputation for doing things to the point where no company was gonna, with a budget that could be sued and lose big money, was probably going to do anything with him. So amazing fucking verbal skills, and what another unique personality. That's the thing. You know, we say there's no Abdullah the Butchers anymore because nobody looks like that, right? Visually. But there's so many guys that used to be in wrestling, there's no personalities like that anymore. And I almost feel bad that a lot of people think that, you know, that was the main calling card of Jack's was the weapons matches and everything, when it was actually just the fact that it was like, yes, Cactus Jack did death matches in the early days before they got out of control and everybody said, what the fuck? But he actually had talent and could do other things and had the fucking verbal skills for it and the mind. Jack may have been an actor in the movies at some point in the modern era when people started casting wrestlers. When he was 30 years old.
Yeah, remember he was in Barry Blaustein's documentary. The casting director said he can't be Denzel, but he could be Denzel's friend.
Well, I think he'd probably fucking killed Denzel's friend and fucking carjacked Denzel and gone and lived in Denzel's house. But anyway,
that live promo though, because I was there in Knoxville. That was our first night, and I had read about New Jack. I had not seen him. I had not seen him in Memphis, but I'd read about New Jack and Homeboy. But they were gone pretty quickly, and
yeah, hey, that's one thing that somebody brought up, and you mentioned it. I didn't even remember he'd been to Memphis, and I don't think he ever mentioned it. But I guess they weren't there but about 2 or 3 weeks. New Jack and Homeboy,
and I didn't think anything of it because this was a period of time where I was a kid, but just based off the wrestling magazines, there were random wrestlers just always popping up there, winning titles. They're gone the next week. So you don't hear about New Jack for a while. All of a sudden you bring him in with Mustafa, who I knew off WCW TV. He was, despite him being a massive guy, he was doing jobs on TV on Saturday nights.
He had never won a match on TBS television. 6 foot fucking 4 or 5, 270 something pounds, that face. And, you know, they just used him as a job guy. But here's the thing. He's the kind of guy in the old days when there was territories, whoever was running TBS would have called Kansas City and said, hey, this guy needs 3 or 4 months, you know, just give him some experience. But they just beat him to death. But anyway, go ahead.
So I hadn't seen them yet, but I've been reading about you bringing in the gangsters. I didn't know what to expect. I had seen the great promos. I'd been watching you and Flair and everyone else for years. You don't see too many promos live, at least like that in an arena. And that was early in the show. It wasn't like that was late in the show. I think maybe it was like one match, maybe two matches, and then Jim Ross and the Gangsters. And I've never seen anything like it. It was the damnedest thing I've ever experienced because he was off and he didn't stop. And I was in a section of smart fans, and you start hearing them murmuring like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." And then he's out.
Well, that's
the greatest live promo ever. I mean, it was because you didn't know what to. I'd never seen him before, and this guy comes out there, and I've never heard anyone speak like that in wrestling. I couldn't wait to see him after that.
That's the thing that, and part of this you could experience in the territory days when it was regional television instead of local. But very seldom does especially a really dedicated wrestling fan these days see a talent for the very first time that blows them away in some fashion. Because now that you can see everything and you can hear about everything, and if anybody's any worth a shit and a real, diehard fan will search them up on the internet or whatever. But back in those days, the way that major talent got over in new territories was because the people had not seen them. And so when you came in and did a first interview on television or had the first match in the arena where people saw you for the first time, if you were a major star, boom, that was, oh shit, okay, this guy's different. But like you said, back in it, especially at that time period, even VCR's been around for 15 years, and with national television and the whole 9 yards, nobody in that building had really ever seen or heard or even heard of his name. And suddenly the promo is like, what the fuck? This is better than the shit we see on national television. And this guy, whether you were and we've mentioned that the majority of the fans in the Knoxville Coliseum in 1994 were not smart fans. There might be 10 or 12 observer readers, if that, in that crowd under normal circumstances. So the smart fan population with Fan Week had boosted it to about 8 times what it normally was. And none of y'all had ever seen this guy. And everybody's like, what the fuck? So, but whether it was the regular fans that were like, fuck this guy, because he got a ton of heat and kept going, and the people were fucking yelling, etc., or whether it was the smart fans that were like, well, where has this been? This guy's better than if he, guys that have been promoing for 20 years. He got over the way you used to. And that it's been hard to do that for more than 30 years because everybody now has heard of somebody at some point before they're fucking ready.
I was always such a big fan of him as a talker. I remember getting mad last year after Dark Side of the Ring because the very end of the show was kind of something that, again, they came to it on their own because of what he said, but you and I, a few years back, were having a talk off air. And I said, if I had a promotion, I would bring in New Jack as my Ron Wright. It would be hysterical. New Jack in a wheelchair cutting his promos and then pretending that he's a weak guy in a wheelchair, but you all know he could walk. It would have been great. And then, of course, the end of Dark Side was him in the wheelchair doing cocaine. That wasn't part of my original vision, but what a talker.
That was his fucking idea for old age. Him in a wheelchair with a knife and doing cocaine. But anyway,
were you going to go, were you already thinking, I hate to ask a wrestling geek question here, but if Jericho hadn't gotten hurt, were you already thinking like long-term thrill seekers, gangsters? What changed or what didn't change with Jericho getting hurt in terms of where you were going to go with tag teams?
Oh, Jesus. That would have been way far in the future because here's the thing. You got to understand, in a perfect world, yes, you figure, well, I'll bring this team in and I'll bring that team and then that blah, blah, blah. But right then, the limited talent that was available to us, we couldn't have anybody that was obviously regularly that was signed to the WWF. We could have their stars for occasion, but nobody under contract was going to come in regular, or WCW or ECW. And we've mentioned them. Most of those guys were better off there because they were from that area and they worked that style. But I just wanted a new babyface tag team because I couldn't, just subsist on the Rock and Roll Express forever. I never intended to finish them up, but I certainly intended to have somebody else to help carry the fucking load. That's Storm and Jericho. Let me just see if I can get these guys over as baby faces. With the Gangstas, it was a low risk investment because if it didn't work, they both lived in Atlanta. They were driving up anyway. I hadn't asked anybody to move, and they were not, they didn't start out making as much money as the top heels that they became. So I just wanted to see if we could get to rock and roll and a good program with the Gangstas and run that for a few months and then get the Thrill Seekers over as baby faces, because then I had other options, and I knew that at some point the Heavenly Bodies were going to be coming back. So it wasn't like I had already planned out, and then the Thrill Seekers can have this long run with the Gangstas. I probably would have stayed away from some of that because those matches would have been greener than pepper trees. But you can't just go with one babyface team or one heel team forever. That's why I wasn't upset when the Bodies got the chance to go to the WWF. They got the chance to make some money. And at the same time, how can I miss you if you won't go away? The Bodies, the people were more happy to see the Bodies come back than they were to see them before they left. So anyway, I didn't have a major program all planned out in my head between the Thrill Seekers and the Gangstas. I didn't know. I honestly thought the Thrill Seekers were more can't miss than the Gangstas because they were just so beautiful. But as I said, Jericho was picky and Lance was married.
Well, you and New Jack will always be connected because it was Smoky Mountain Wrestling that put him on the map. He worked USWA, he worked for Sammy Kent, but really it was Smoky Mountain that discovered him, and he was almost like polished and ready to go from day one as soon as he started doing those promos with a very concerned Bob Caudle standing there.
And by the way, Bob Caudle used to be a fucking aide to Senator Jesse Helms in North Carolina, who's like the fucking combination of the most conservative religious person in the world and a grand dragon of the Ku Klux Klan. But Bob was a wonderful person. But
whenever you see that clip of New Jack saying, I want to send a shout out to OJ.
Yeah.
Keep up the good work. Too less to worry about. You just see Bob behind him shaking his head.
Bob died a little inside. That was like, oh my God. Oh my God. But anyway, but what I was going to say was and that's the thing. I wish Jack and I now at this point, we hadn't been on the outs for so long and over Paul Lee's fucking, kabuki-ish cloak and dagger locker room politic bullshit. But at the same time, at least we were able to hug and not kiss. And I've mentioned Jack's warts over the last several years as well as, but I've always put him over as he was a unique fucking talent. And I'm glad that he got a chance to settle down a little bit before something happened. But again, you never know. Fucking heart attack. That's why I prefer to use my heart as little as possible. Therefore, it will undergo as little stress as possible.
When you think back to New Jack's career, you can obviously think about Smoky Mountain, maybe even USWA with Homeboy, Mark Freer, or ECW, where there were the Gangstanators. Wasn't it him and John Cronus?
Yeah, the Terminator and the Gangsta became the Gangstanators.
I mean, there's so many amazing moments, so many attempted murders. I mean, it's just so much.
so many felonious assaults.
On video alone.
Yes.
It would probably be
Hey, wait, I got to tell you one more. I don't know if I told this when we talked about the dark side of the ring, but I swear to God, one night I wasn't there, but Ronnie West promoted a Smoky Mountain Spot show in North Georgia somewhere, just right over the Chattanooga, Tennessee state line there by Chattanooga. And Hilda Muffin called me from a payphone. That's how long ago it was, after the show, to tell me what had gone on. Apparently, Jack got so much heat with there was 250 people there, and they all apparently wanted to kill him. he'd gotten so much heat that some incident happened and he was cutting promos, and I don't know whether they were shoving or hitting or whatever the fuck went on, but the goddamn police got involved in it. And then when the police got involved, some way or another, Jack started fucking having a fucking freak out. They thought he told him he's about to have a heart attack and he needed to go get his medicine or some shit. And he went back in the locker room, grabbed his shit and took off. By the time that the cops got back there to find him, it's like, what the fuck? Well, we think he went to the hospital or something. I don't know. Hildebrand was like, yeah, the cops were going to arrest him, but then he convinced him he was having a heart attack. Actually, no, Brian still believed at that point, I think, that he actually had a heart attack. And I said, if he had a heart attack, what do you think he would have got away? Oh, yeah. Well, but I just wanted to let you know that we had an incident, but nobody got arrested. But New Jack may have had a heart attack. That was Brian's agent report calling in. But New Jack did not go to jail in that podunk town. Anyway. Where were you going with that?
I was saying there were so many amazing moments on camera, behind the scenes, so many assaults and felonies, misdemeanors, and so much more that if you were a big fan of New Jack, it would probably be pretty hard to figure out which moment you want to capture in an oil painting.
You are exactly right. It would be hard to figure that out. Would you want an oil painting of him assuming the position with the cops patting him down? Or would you want an oil painting of him throwing Vic Grimes off a scaffold after he tased him?
Was that his idea, the patting down by the referee?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Anyway, no matter what moment that you want to relive forever, whether it's one of New Jack's or one of your own families or friends or pets or whatever, the folks at Paint Your Life can keep that memory not only alive, but in vivid, brilliant color with a beautiful portrait hand done by a team of world-class artists from paintyourlife.com. They can take any photograph or combination of photographs and from them work from that to give you a hand-painted portrait at an affordable price. It's a quick and easy process, and you get the hand-painted portrait in about 3 weeks. So, as we said, you can select any picture or combination of pictures. So bring the family together. And folks, if you go to paintyourlife.com, you can check out some of the examples, and you can also check out their guarantee. If you don't love the final painting, your money is refunded. So once again, team of world-class artists, you get to pick, send them the picture, get it in 3 weeks or so. If you don't love it, it's a money-back guarantee. How can you beat this deal? I'll tell you how. Brian, would you like to know how?
I want to know how.
Well, I'll tell you how. How? You just text the word DRIVE, D-R-I-V-E, to 64,000. That's DRIVE to 64,000. 64 with 3 zeros. DRIVE to 64,000, and you get 20% off and free shipping of this incredible piece of artwork that you're going to be proud to hang in your own home. I've never been so proud to be hung in my life. Folks, once again, paintyourlife.com. There's no risk. It's guaranteed. And 20% off and free shipping if you text the word DRIVE to 64,000. Terms apply. Available at paintyourlife.com/terms. But just go ahead and text DRIVE to 64,000. Get it over with. Save yourself some money, you sapsuckers.